Hello. So day 3, moon 1. Okay, so we're going to try and make this quick. I have got a lot of suggestions for today's one. So still referencing and utilizing the Lunar Tao by Den Ming Dao for the day by day prompt. Day 3, moon 1 is a little bit less specific. So it's not really going into anything that is traditionally done on this day. It's just basically saying that obviously with all the best intentions, obviously when you start a new year, we're talking about good intentions and how you want to carry on for the rest of the year. So with all the best intentions, yes, you can set your outlook for the rest of the year and that's awesome, but you can not really avoid misfortune. So it's talking about preparedness for misfortune. So I like an old saying which says, the true good luck is being prepared for when fortune arises, or good fortune arises. But you can also say exactly the same. This is referring to the opposite of that, which is obviously be prepared for misfortune. So, okay, so misfortune is inevitable. Otherwise, what would there be to sweep away at the end of the year? It's a nice bit. But good fortune and bad fortune alike come to us. It's how we respond that determines whether we accumulate more luck and safety than disaster and danger. In fact, one might argue that a great deal of civilization arises from the mastery of doing dangerous things safely. Okay, so the best way to do things safely, obviously, is to do it from the right mindset. So the best mindset to do anything or to make good decisions, wise decisions, is the alpha brainwave. So you have 4 main recognized brainwaves. You have the beta, the alpha, the theta, and the delta. Or I'll do that the other way around because of the camera, but the way you're looking at it. So the highest is beta, then alpha, then theta, and then delta. Delta is when you're in a deep sleep. Theta is kind of that more of a meditation state, or it's just believed to be when you're just falling asleep. Alpha is the optimal place to make good decisions from. Beta is a really highly focused brainwave thing, but it's not something you should try and maintain constantly because you will burn out. So someone who works in air traffic control, that kind of thing, at points in time when they've really got that, they will switch into something called beta. Race car driver who's taking hairpins and all that kind of stuff at ridiculously high speeds and try not to crash into other people or things, that's beta. But in your daily day-to-day life, the best place to be is alpha. So that's focus without being too heightened, without being drowsy, and definitely without any kind of cortisol, stress hormone influence. So we're going to talk about cortisol. How do we get into theta? How do we get into alpha? Sorry. Okay, so there is a system called the Silva method, as in Jose Silva. He is a guy who, when he was alive, had lots of children. He wanted to know if he could improve his children's grades. And he did all these experiments, safe experiments, with meditation, as just point out, using different meditations and ways of getting his children to get into an alpha brainwave state so they can make better decisions and better choices and study better and learn better, retain information better, all that kind of stuff. And yes, he improved their grades by doing that. He gave them a very quick way of getting into alpha brainwave. Later on, he actually discovered that he was able to give his children effectively extrasensory perceptions. They started answering questions before the question was even asked, that kind of stuff. But, okay, so sticking with what we were talking about. So the alpha brainwave. So this is a scanning method. So you will have, if you've ever done meditation, you possibly would have come through things they call scanning, which is just like focusing here, relaxing here, focusing here, relaxing here, focusing here, relaxing here, all that kind of stuff. Head to toe, all the way through. The main difference would be he would use a visual trigger. So this is kind of like neuro-linguistic programming. but it's a visual trigger that you would do before you go through that guided meditation of all the points of the body all the way down. So you would use 333, visualize that however you want. You go through all of that scanning, then you go 222, then you focus on scenes that will make you kind of happy, effectively. So whether that be being around family, being in a hammock in the middle of the forest, being on the beach, floating on the sea, all that kind of stuff. Beautiful, blissful scenes, that kind of stuff. So this is through that focus, you gradually start to release dopamine and serotonin and all that kind of stuff. Happy hormones, neurotransmitters. You then focus on 111, and that is then your center, that is alpha brainwave state. You practice this every day, and then once you find like about a week in or even less, once you visualize 333, your body just starts doing it. You don't have to do the meditation. 333, and your body's already just gone click, 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 and switched everything off, or relaxed everything, released all the sinew and muscle, etc. You then, when you visualize 222, you don't even have to visualize the scenes. It starts releasing the dopamine, and then you might even find that the scenes just start jumping into your head anyway, because it's that correlation of what you've just programmed. So it's kind of self-hypnosis, but it's not. And then 111 would be the final bit. So eventually, within like a couple of weeks or a month, literally 333, and then my body's just done it. Effectively, it's just gone boom, down. And then 222, and then you start to switch more into the happy hormone thing. Give that a few seconds to kick in. 111, and within seconds you are there. You are now at alpha brainwave state. You can then go further into theta and further into delta, and there's things like gamma and all that kind of stuff beyond that, but the main four: beta, alpha, theta, delta. Okay, that's a really good method. I would highly suggest, if you can find a way. There are people who teach it on streaming services. There is also Mind Valley. That was the one I preferred, which was Vishen Lukiati. He is the obviously founder of Mind Valley, and he reads it through. It's really just finding a voice that works for you. I'm not a qualified teacher of that. I won't teach it, obviously, but you can find that, and you can find free versions, because Mind Valley does cost, So a nice way to get into their tuning forks. There is a set of tuning forks called the Brain Tuning Forks, which I now use. And they literally have what you call the fundamental tuning fork. This is the one you use all the time, that goes by one side of the ear. You have the other one, which can be beta, alpha, theta, or delta. This is the alpha one. I have all four, obviously, but you can use by placing them either side. Whether you can hear that on the camera or not, I don't know. But the fundamental is one resonance. That's the one it's the root. And then the other ones are another resonance, and it's the dissonance or the distortion between the two that is the brainwave frequency that you are looking for. And between those two, obviously that was alpha, so that would set alpha brainwave. So for someone comes to me for a treatment, but they're looking like wired, and they just need to, or they've had too much caffeine, or they've just, etc. They're stressed. That's a good way of starting off. You can kind of take them into alpha, talk things through, etc. Get whatever needles or crystals or etc. that you are working with, get those on, and then take them down into theta. Get the music, get the lighting, get the air, get the ambience, get everything set in that, and then from after treatments, again, you can kind of take them out. So with most treatments, people will fall asleep, so that's going into deep theta, possibly delta, and it's a good way of kind of bringing them back out. So you can bring them back into theta and then back into alpha. So they are then safe to walk home, drive home, etc. Okay, talking about cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. A good quick way of getting cortisol down, obviously meditation and finding ways, etc. White tea. That is what really works for me, as well as another thing. You can use things like lemon balm and all these kind of like herbal type things. Really do your own study into that and see what what works for you, and if there's any side effects that might interact with any kind of drugs you're taking, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, white tea is a form of tea, much like green tea. It just has less chlorophyll than green tea. so it's more white. You'll sometimes see it called silver needle tea. More especially the stuff that comes from the plantations in India. Obviously Marco Polo took all these all these tea plants, bushes from China, and then obviously we started the British plantations in India. Okay, so silver needle white tea, not to be confused with pine needle tea. It would be that you would find it as that. That's generally the cheaper one, and that generally for polyphenols or polyphenols, that's all you need. If you want the really high grade, high taste sort of stuff, then you would go more towards China. That is called bai cha. So bai means white in this sense, by depending on tonality, but in this sense it means white. It also means 100 and has other meanings. Sorry, cha or cha is tea. So bai cha, white tea. Lu cha, green tea. Muli hua cha, jasmine tea. Hong cha, red tea, which became black tea from shipping, and that's what we've got used to over here. But yes, red tea. So white tea has a lot less chlorophyll than green tea, but it has anywhere up to 200 times the amount of polyphenols or polyphenols than you find in green tea, and polyphenols rapidly reduce cortisol. So it's also a very good thing for if you're doing intermittent fasting. It's also a very good thing for post-exercise, especially if you tend to do more like high intensity interval training, which is the way I would suggest, especially for men. You don't want to be doing too much long distance because you burn yourself out, you burn kidney essence. But post in high intensity training, you are in a fight or flight state. Your body's releasing cortisol. The longer you release cortisol, the more you start to produce estrogen or encourage estrogen and lower testosterone. So if you're trying to build muscle, it's not conducive. You want testosterone. You want high levels of human growth hormone, HGH, which comes through from numerous other things. Fasting is a very good way of re-encouraging all of that. And again, white tea is very good for fasting because when you're in a fasted state, you are more prone to stress. So meditation and getting cortisol down and all that kind of stuff is very beneficial. White tea is quite floral, where green tea is more metallic, that kind of thing, depending on the grade and how long you let it brew and how much you use, all that kind of stuff. White tea, do your own investigation, have a look into it, see whether it's for you. Works for me, and it helps me to quit smoking, is another good reference for that. Okay, smells so if we're talking about focus and relaxation, I really like benzoin. You'll also see it called Loban, but it's generally sold as benzoin, especially when it's in essential oils. I prefer essential oils nowadays to joss sticks or masala sticks, or whatever you want to call them, incense sticks or incense cones, etc. But it's obviously completely up to you and the size of the room and everything else. Benzoin is a really nice one for focus, and it's not got an overpowering smell. It's something that can fit nicely in with other smells if you like to do like a high note, mid note and back note, that sort of thing, or a high note, back note and a harmonizer, that kind of stuff. It fits in with other things, and you can fit it in with other things that are good for focus, like rosemary, or things that are good for focus and memory, like basil essential oil, or other things that are good for relaxing and grounding and all that kind of stuff. So things like myrrh and sandalwood, that kind of stuff. Yeah, okay, so those are some ideas of smells. One thing I would suggest is grounding, feet on soil. So in the winter, it's not always really that feasible to go out and stick your feet in snow or frosty ground. So, but yes, grounding mats are a pretty cheap way of doing that. So as far as helping you sleep and help getting rid of any kind of inflammatory responses that you have from constantly being surrounded by Wi-Fi and ultra low frequencies from things like screens, blue lights, TVs, computers, etc., all that kind of stuff, especially if you live near a telegraph pole, all that kind of stuff. Yes, those are positive ions. Those are the things that will help keep you awake and can contribute towards inflammation, etc. So a grounding mat is a good way of getting rid of those positive ions, because you stand on the mat or lay on the mat, and those ions are then routed through to the plug, which, same as all other electricity, is, you have an earthing wire in there. However, with that, you don't get the negative ions, which come up from the soil. So you have this ion exchange when you have your bare feet on the soil or grass. Okay, that to me is my favourite, obviously, especially in springtime, summertime, bare feet on soil, sat up against a tree, properly grounding, listening to birdsong, which is the next bit, because birdsong is innately programmed into us. So listening to birdsong has been measured, obviously, with CAT scans and everything else that they do, all the different methods they use to measure brain activity during a stimulus. Listening to birdsong naturally, very quickly, downregulates any kind of stress hormone, any kind of stress response. And that is believed to be because ultimately, if you're in a spot where there should be birds and there aren't any birds singing, then there's danger around. So if you are in a place and there are birds singing and you know you're safe because the birds aren't worried, you don't need to be worried. So you can get, that's waves obviously, but yeah, you've got you can get natural bird song things online if you want to play that. Nowadays I do play, when I do like a crystal treatment, which is like an hour long, so always a 2-hour booking, but we have the time to meet and greet, we have the time to get to do diagnosis, we have the time to get crystals on, fixed and in place, and then it's a solid hour of me not being in the room with just them on the couch in sleeping. For some people it's crying out, everything else, but I have my own sort of music playlists, etc. But at the end of the hour I still have the phone that I control music with me, and I will switch to, once it hits that hour, I will switch the music to birdsong. The one I use is from the streaming service I use is Spotify, but it probably exists on all of them, is the Wild Walkers, whether you can see that on there. But they have got numerous recordings, really high-end recording material, or machines, effectively microphones, and they have just recorded birdsong from like nature reserves. So there's a lot, there's never any blanks in there, there's no music in the background, there's nothing else, it is just birdsong. So, and this is how I would wake someone up from a crystal treatment, or from any or from a needle treatment, if we're working on more deeper psychological things and trying to shift sort of deeper things like complex PTSD, etc., then that's the way I like to bring people out of that treatment nowadays. Yeah, and I have the heat, obviously the room fully heated and all that kind of stuff, so it is kind of a simulation of springtime, summertime, etc., that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm going to turn that down now, but excuse me. Okay, last bit I'll cover very quickly is some crystal suggestions. So when you're talking about calming crystals and smells as well, obviously it's such a personal thing, but there is a consensus. Amethyst is probably the biggest consensus for calming crystals, definitely from the crystal kingdom, but obviously you have the mineral kingdom and everything else. But when I talk about stone medicine, obviously, especially how I was taught by my teacher, Sarah Thomas, we're talking about consciousness in itself. We're talking about all the crystals and minerals and the amorphous stones. Yeah, so stones is a kind of a nicer way of putting it. It's more of an umbrella body. So amethyst, everyone knows what it looks like. It is the purple one. It generally comes in geodes and forms this really nice iron and I think titanium in quartz, forms that purple color. It's really calming, it's very multifaceted, it's very good for third eye stuff if you work with the chakra system. Yeah, it's got that kind of purple. In Chinese Taoist thing would be the color of, when we're talking about soul evolution stuff, we are talking about purple, because we're talking about the Jing, the kidneys, and all that kind of stuff is the fundamental physicality of the body. going all the way through to the bones, obviously, because your bones are predominantly water. But also the bone marrow, is all this kind of stuff, and blood and everything else. It's all at foundation water with other things added. So plasma is obviously, Then when we're talking about the heart, we're talking about the colour red. We're talking about the mind, the spirit, Shen. With the kidneys, we're talking about Ji, but we're also talking about Jing. So Jing is really more the DNA. It's the root of what your physicality is. Heart and body, heart and soul, spirit. Shen, the two of those together make what we call Ling. The Chinese call Ling, that is the soul. And then Ming is the expression of the soul. So that, obviously red and blue, purple. So that's just that. Yeah, effectively, won't go too much into that. But other stones, looking at petrified wood. So going back to the rooting, earthing, grounding wood. So petrified wood is technically a jasper. So this is actually quartz. There's nothing wood left about this other than the image and the resonance of wood. You can even see little cracks in here where the silica has got in. So at some point a tree has fallen and has died, and obviously those bits of branches, logs, woods, roots, all that kind of stuff has been covered by sand in like a desert sort of type area. And silica, effectively what makes up quartz, is sand. So, but it's at some point taken on a crystalline structure and then formed this, especially with quartz like amethyst, it's formed this trigonal, hexagonal structure. It's both trigonal and hexagonal. So that's trigonal 3 and hexagonal 6. So 3, 6, 9. 3 and 6 is 9. It's a nice whole. So there's a real thing with quartz, especially clear quartz being the master healer. It's the one that you can use for so many different things. But silica, when it gets into things like jaspers, it doesn't have that. It has more like rice grain forms of silica. So it can kind of integrate with whatever else is there. So like if there was something like clay there, then silica gets in there and forms around it, you might get something more like red jasper, etc. So quartz retains and amplifies information, not just in the, if you want to call it the floopy-doopy crystal world, but it is also a retainer of and transmitter of information in the technology world. So they are now using lab-grown quartz to store information, because it can store a piece of quartz that size. A flat piece of quartz can store information that you would get in a ridiculously large circuit board. So that's the future of technology in many ways. And using things like graphene for batteries and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, getting back to that, so that is ultimately quartz retains the information. So it retains the information and the essence of wood. Wood is a very ground effort. It's why we like trees. They are rooted to the earth. It's a good place where you can ground and just breathe easy. There's something innate. Again, obviously we instinctively know, or we should know, that trees are our symbiotic partners. They create oxygen as we create CO2. They cannot live without CO2, which is why the carbon neutral thing is ridiculous. And we cannot live without oxygen, which is why we should be saving trees and dealing with plastic rather than trying to remove cow farts. Anyway, so the last one I'm going to mention is iron oxide, also known as hematite. So hematite, the word hema comes from, as in hemoglobin, effectively. So as it erupts from the earth, it is blood red, and it is also iron is what we use to make red blood cells. So the vast majority of the physical earth that we stand on is iron. You could think of every other mineral in the earth as being like trace minerals, because we're talking like 80+% of the earth is iron. So I think it's that from memory, but yes. Okay, hematite, in that sense, we're talking about the physical earth. The physical earth is yin. Light from the sun is yang, the earth is yin. So we are talking about yin things. We're talking about grounding. We're talking about the physical earth itself. We're talking about something that is very weighty and very heavy in that sense. My teacher described it as being like a weighted blanket. And yes, when you literally place a blanket over someone and put hematite all over them, especially in particular acupuncture and acupressure points, you really can send someone to sleep very quickly and stimulate loads of things to do with certain points, like up here, spleen 10 for blood flow, etc., and key yin points for yin deficiency, all that kind of stuff. But hematite can come in this kind of botryoidal, gnarly, kind of bubbly sort of style. You can get it when it's been tumbled and polished, more in that kind of thing, or smaller versions of, a whole bag of it there. Or you can get it in these rough pieces, which I really like, just for because they've got flat edges and they just sit really well on top of blankets. Whereas these are more for the bits on, like on the inside of the legs, where you're not going to get them to sit there with the blanket. So I use straps, but you can use tape, all that kind of stuff. Won't go too much into that kind of the actual teachings of that, but as a stone in itself, just as a kind of grounding and rooting, and some people even think of it as being balancing of the hemispheres, that kind of thing. Hematite is an amazing stone. I think that is everything we're going to do for today. Yes, we are. So we are already at 25 minutes. I will leave that there for today. So that is effectively it. You know, being ready for misadventure, being ready for fortune is the best way you can do that, and the best brainwave state to be in that is to be in the alpha brainwave state. Try those different things, see what works for you. There are other ways as well. Obviously, look for meditations, look for things, breath work, box breathing, ways to get your sympathetic nervous system regulated and to get yourself into that comfortable alpha brainwave state. I will see you tomorrow.